Well, we're glad to have Brother Rapha Baroudi going to come and speak to us tonight. And Brother Baroudi has a unique perspective and has faced many of the dangers that we fear with the loss of religion, loss of freedom of religion. And so being from Syria, and he's faced a lot of that restriction on religion. But I'm glad that God sent him to us, and we ask him to come speak for us.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Pastor, for giving me the opportunity tonight to speak. I believe the last time I spoke before you, it was a little bit over a year ago, so thank you finally, Pastor, for allowing me again. It took only a year, so... the last time I spoke, and we discussed briefly, I don't know how many of us actually remember, we discussed briefly the testimony that I had growing up in the country of Syria, and what's my family, and the work that God allowed us to do over there. It's a quick refresher, a quick reminder. I left there close now to 19 years ago, so when I was about 20. So it's been quite some time. You know, I consider myself very Americanized by this stage, really. I've never been back, but my parents and I have a sister who still live there, and they are so much still active in the work that, you know, the Lord allows them to do. After the last time I spoke, Pastor actually approached me, and we were talking a little bit afterwards, and we wanted to discuss more perhaps the Islam and Christianity and the perspective of the view that we have on God and who God is and what God is from both perspectives. Before I start, I feel a little bit obligated to say like some type of a disclaimer, if you wish. I truly believe that the objective is never to when we have these type of discussions, the objective is never really to win a debate or to prove a point, or to be able to, even worse than that, to put the opponent or the other side on a position of humility. That actually defeats the purpose of why we have these discussions. We have these discussions for the sole purpose of trying to walk the journey along people and help them see the light and bring them to the knowledge of who Jesus Christ is. So really, let's keep that in mind as throughout our discussion tonight. One more thing. Most of the Muslims that we know in life, generally speaking, and I know there's a good amount actually here in Orlando, but I don't know about you and your daily interactions. Most Muslims that, you know, the ones that decide to study and take their devotions seriously and study the life of Muhammad and the life of and the hadith and the traditions, come to in their journey in life, come to like what we call here in the West like a three-pronged fork, right, where they have to choose in the road that they are taking. And those three-pronged fork, those three decisions or those three choices before them are whether apostasy, apathy, or radicalization. And it's never really easy to, if you know any Muslim, never really easy to, there is no clear signs, right, or warning signals that this person is actually on that road or on that journey or about to make a decision in their life. So the best approach really is to walk along with them, to have a personal relationship and have a discussion. And that's really the objective of all of this. That's my heart, that's our mission's heart back home in Syria. So before we start, I just would like to start with a quick prayer, if that's all right. Father in heaven, we're truly humbled that we are able, Lord, to speak to you directly, and that, Lord, that you revealed yourself in an intimate fashion, an intimate way to us. We are so unworthy and so we are nothing, Lord. So thank you, Lord, for your grace and mercy and love and allowing us to have that personal relationship. Lord, I pray that tonight will be you will be with us, Lord, as you promised, and you'll allow us, Lord, to understand and to take a closer look at those world views around us, Lord, and how can we understand you, Lord, more and know who you are. Father, I ask you that you bless us as we go our separate ways tonight. Help us be better Christians and burden our hearts with your work. Give us a good week ahead of us and all of this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Also, man, time is already racing me. While I firmly believe that Muslims and Christians' conception of God are quite different, we will tonight be using the words Allah and God somewhat interchangeably. And there's two reasons for that. Reason number one, really quickly, that is the word Allah is the Arabic word for God for the Arabic-speaking people. It's used in the Arabic translations of the Bible, and it's derived directly from the word Yahweh, or Jehovah in Hebrew. Secondly, or second reason, for the purpose specifically for this discussion, I am going to try to compare the Muslim or the Islamic view from a classical theology background to the Christian one. And to be able to do that, to repeatedly qualify the difference between God and Allah would be probably a distraction. So we're just going to use them a little bit interchangeably, and that's how our approach will be tonight. As I mentioned, I grew up in a heavily Islamic culture in Islamic country. And in the years of my life, when I grew up closely to the Islamic culture, I experienced two special words were always spoken in the Arabic world. And every time I would hear them, I would feel almost they take on a physical form, to be honest with you. They were so empowering to hear those words. Those words, we'll talk about them here in a moment. In the mosques overseas, specifically in Syria, and a lot of course, other Islamic countries, I don't think they do that here in the US. When the mu'adhin, when his resonant voice screams, and the mu'adhin, by the way, is the person who calls through the speakers for the Muslims to come and worship God and do their ritualistic prayers in the mosques. When the resonant voice of the mu'adhin says the words Allahu Akbar, as the words leave his throat, really, he would draw them out in a long and a tonal way, basically like a chant that steadily rises up and then cuts off. So it would sound like something like Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, like a small chant. And that's how it begins the Islamic prayer, call to prayer. Upon hearing these words, Muslims who are devoted enough, they would stop what they are doing, they would look up to the words of sound, they would rise up, wash their hands, cleanse themselves, and proceed to perform those ritualistic prayers. Those two words hold such a huge meaning and huge definition for the Islamic theology, if you wish, that it has actually a special word. It's called takbir. Many Westerns, heard those words uttered, and especially since, I think maybe since 9/11, really. There's been a lot of movies, TV shows, the media always describes those two words. You always now hear it. Prior to that, probably what was once maybe so uncommon, so unfamiliar, became all of a sudden all over the place. The vast majority of the Westerners that I spoke to associate usually those two words with violence, with acts of terrorism, with fear. Usually, we would see them sometimes maybe on TV. Those two words are uttered by robed men with long straggly beards, maybe shooting bullets up in the sky. And they shout Allahu Akbar as means of proclaiming to non-Muslims that Allah is greater than the Western imperialists, and that one day Islam will subdue them, and that one day will come. It is true that some Muslims use those words as a battle cry, but for the vast majority of Muslims, those two words have a completely and far different association. They do not inspire dread, fear, or violence. On the contrary, for most Muslims, but not all, those words inspire reverence, awe, and humility. I like what there's a book, Encyclopedia of Islam. A.J. Westingson wrote that book, and he had a small description or interpretation of what Allahu Akbar, and I thought it would be good to put it in here. And he says, Allahu Akbar is the briefest expression of the absolute superiority of the one God. Is used in Muslim life in different circumstances in which the idea of God, His greatness and goodness is suggested. The takbir, or those Allahu Akbar, is part of the call to prayer repeated 5 times a day. Faithful believers may use it as an exclamation in response to anything out of ordinary, whether that is good or ill. I recall very vividly when I was growing up, my parents would have many friends who were Muslims, and when sometimes would come visit us or come, have visitation time in our home. When they enter the home, they would say those words. They would say Allahu Akbar. That was way of saying a blessing upon the home and upon the people who lived in that home. Many Muslims I knew and love use those words to express delight when surprised maybe with a pleasant turn of events. And also, they use those words when they are facing a grave illness. They say Allahu Akbar as a declaration that God is greater than their daunting circumstances, whatever that circumstance is. So to most Muslims, the takbir, the proclamation that God is greater, is both expression of praise and also a call to prayer. Those two words express the most elemental beliefs of every single Muslim. Not just that God is great, the translation, sometimes how we have it here in the West is a little bit incorrect. But it's not that He is just great, but He is greater. He's greater than anything we can conceive. He is absolutely the greatest possible being. In the hadith, which is the tradition that tells us about the life of Muhammad away from the Quran, tells us basically that that Muhammad, when he said that verily there are 99 names of God, and whoever recites them shall enter paradise. This is how fundamental God's greatness is to Islam. To recite a list of great attributes is very tantamount to who God is. And understanding those beautiful names actually allows you entrance to paradise. I'm saying all of this because I believe it's very important to understand the foundation of Muslims and the Islamic faith as we encounter them. The fact that many, let me back up a moment, sorry. God's greatness forms the way Muslims can, or more accurately, cannot relate to Him. Islamic classical theology holds that God is so great that it is, and so infinite in His power and His magnitude, that it is impossible for the human beings, for us, to really know Him or to grasp anything about Him beyond, of course, what is superficial. This makes it impossible to have a relationship with God. Although God is personal in the matter that He is conscious and He expresses a will and we see that clearly in the Quran, no one can know his personality to any meaningful degree. This fact, I truly believe that it troubles a lot of Muslims, because there is a lot of Muslims, they believe that they have a relationship with God. One of Muslims' premier theologians and philosophers, his name was Al-Ghazali, tells us that those with the most knowledge about God know that they have no way of really knowing Him. He says this: the end result of the knowledge of the Arifin, the word Arifin is an Arabic old word, describes basically those who possess knowledge. So let's back up. The end result of the knowledge of the Arifin, those who possess the knowledge, is their inability to know Him. And their knowledge is, in truth, that they do not know Him, and that it is absolutely impossible for them to really know Him. So basically, no matter how much knowledge you think you have in Islam, no matter how much knowledge you have, no matter how much study you spent and personal experience you think you have, you will never be able to know God. You know about Him or of Him, but that is it. God has chosen to reveal Himself to humanity, and Islam and Christianity, maybe we agree on that aspect, just from the surface, that He chose to reveal Himself to us. But where the issue is that He chose to reveal Himself, and to what degree He chose to reveal Himself. Muslims basically believe that God has revealed Himself in a very mitigated way. So what does that mean? Mitigated, that means He reveals His will and only a glimpse of His personality. And even His will is revealed through mediators, through His Prophet Muhammad. The Bible, the response that we have as Christians when we are having these discussions is that the Bible tells us that God did not hold back from having an intimate relationship with Him. The author of the book of Hebrews basically unfolds really the story of God's revelation. Hebrews chapter 1, for the sake of time, we're not going to read that tonight, but Hebrews chapter 1, I'll focus mainly on the first 2 verses. It starts with this: God, who at sundry times in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by His Son, whom He hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also He made the worlds. These words illuminate basically what is the theme of the New Testament, which is God's very way, in His special way, to be revealed intimately with us. That is the purpose of really Jesus coming to earth, is that God establishing that relationship, that He wanted to reveal Himself to us intimately. And that is something that does not exist in Islam. Think for a moment about how maybe we decide to, if there is someone that we really care a lot about, and we want them to know a lot about us, we want to reveal ourselves to them, we want to express ourselves to them, and we want them to have a better understanding of who we are. Do we just, send them letters? Well, that's probably an old analogy now, text messages now and emails. Or do we basically do a phone call? No. What the best possible way to reveal yourself to someone is by personal and direct interaction. And that is the greatest way to reveal really your character and your personality to that special someone. Islam knows no such revelation. It has only words brought to it by messengers other than God. Concerning God's will, and while the gospel is given to us in the revealed text of the Bible, there is something intimately revealed as well. The Bible is the written revelation about His personal revelation through His Son, Jesus Christ. I can vividly recall, it's been a while, but can vividly recall having a discussion at our home with a Muslim friend came over, and we were reading some passages from the Bible and some passages from the Quran, and we're trying to explore, who really God is from both perspectives. And we came across Romans chapter 5, and it was also, although I read that passage many times, during that specific moment, it was quite illuminating for me. God revealed something new to me, honestly, when I was with Him. So we'll read the Romans chapter 5, verse 6, just to give you an idea what I'm going with this. Paul says, "For when we were yet without strength, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die. Yet peradventure for a good man some would even dare to die. But God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." Does any other worldview out there provide any proclamation of something as great as God's love and greatness as what we just read? Nothing. Absolutely, the Quran there's no existence about any type of personal relationship, God's love, having the ability to redeem yourself. The only thing that is there is that God only blesses and only reveals His will to those who completely are subdued under the name of Islam. The differences in the Bible is that, as we read, Christ died for the ungodly. The philosopher that we just mentioned, the Islamic Muslim philosopher Al-Ghazali, said that love is applied to God is different from the love that we have towards each other. But in essence, really, he is wrong about that, because God's true love is absolutely at the highest expression, and is the best example at a highest standard that we have. This reminds me of what C.S. Lewis wrote in his observation about the context of God's true love compared to ours. He said, "But the great thing to remember is that, though our feelings come and go, His love for us does not. It is not wearied by our sins or our indifference, and therefore it is quite relentless in its determination that we shall be cured of those sins, at whatever cost to us, at whatever cost to Him." God's love is the definition of what true, pure, and perfect love is. And so it is greater, because God is greater. The incarnation and the cross of Christ are the greatest possible demonstrations of that great love. We have the greatest love being demonstrated by the greatest possible being. So God is greater, we believe that, but it's our perception of who He is and what God is. I wanted to leave a few minutes to see if there's any time up for questions or discussion, or if anyone would like to have the last time during Sunday school we had a good amount of that type of a back and forth. So if anyone have any type of questions right here, we can definitely take the time and just talk about that.
I guess it's hard to think about. They don't really believe that God loves them. They just have to be in or...
Right, so although those 99 names that we mentioned very briefly of Allah or of God, who He is in the Quran, there is one of them actually described that He is, basically it says God is Al-Wadud, and that's an Arabic word, means He is love. But there is no way that there is nothing in the Quran that tells us how He expressed that love. And the contrary, God in the Quran is really a God of pure will that is only expressed through his prophet and his messenger. And that message is based on conquering the violence and the complete submission to that will. Yes, ma'am.
So, they call these prayers 5 times a day. What are they praying for? If they can't have a relationship with God, or they don't know what direction, what are they, what they just, like, Catholics do, just repeat something that we're going reading?
It's actually quite similar. That's a really good question, and I think the answer is a little bit complex. So I'll try to give you a maybe more concise answer to the best of my ability. The ritualistic prayers that they go through the 5 times a day is really based on recitation, specifically surah, which means chapter. It's an Arabic word, chapter basically, 112 in the Quran. And that chapter is quite small, and it's just basically a recitation. Some Muslims like to go ahead and also recite the 99 names if they have them memorized during that prayer. The hadith, again, the tradition that tells us about Muhammad's interactions and his with the common people. He mentioned more than once that the recitation of that surah or of that chapter is almost enough to grant you entrance to paradise. He said that chapter alone holds more than 1/3 of the Quran in value and in importance. So that's one of the most important things that they recite to every single prayer.
So there is a space of place in work to have it, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's levels of that, depending on who you are. Is men and women the same enough, same or different?
Well, so absolutely it's a works-based type of a faith. There is a separation between those who perform more than those who just, if you wish, take the road of apathy, and passiveness towards God. So those who ritualistically, pray the five prayers a day, those who fast the month of Ramadan throughout the year, those who actually go and they perform the Hajj, which is when they go visit Mecca and they, go around the Kaaba. Those are definitely regarded higher than the common Muslim who cannot do that. So there are different awards for those, as described in the Quran and the Hadith, for those who do all of these kind of things.
Basically, everybody ends up in heaven, just the position never changes depending on what you do.
The very short and concise answer is yes. It's honestly a little bit more than that. But yes, the short, concise answer is absolutely yes. That is true.
So they have really nothing to fear, they don't believe in hell.
I'm sorry?
So they have nothing to fear, they don't believe in hell, everyone gets to heaven.
No, they do believe in hell. There is hell. Did I miss that part? I'm sorry when you spoke.
If I missed it, if you said it,
No, it's all right. I probably didn't hear the question correctly, and I apologize about that. No, they do believe in hell. However, I thought the question was more focused towards the access to heaven and basically access to paradise and the works needed for each one to access paradise. The more works that you do, the more rewards you get. There are some radicalized really ideas out there about the ones who believed, for example, in the ones who performed 9/11, and those type of acts of terrorism. They believe there are much higher type of rewards for killing the Jews and basically the Christians. I would just want to kind of look at the last words of Muhammad and let's look at the last words of Jesus Christ. The last words of Muhammad were, perish the Jews and the Christians from the Arabia. And what were the last words of Jesus Christ on the cross? And I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry, I don't have the verse in front of me, but Father, forgive them, they know not what they're doing. That gives you exactly in a nutshell, the big difference between those two religions.
So, is the people that don't believe anything about Allah, their God, that go to hell?
Absolutely, you have to believe in God, and you have to believe in the gods in the Quran. The God of the Quran, that's who you have to believe in to have access to heaven. I think outside of that will not get you anywhere. Basically, hell is your way.
Is hell similar to what we teach hell is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Now, if we're serving the same God, sharing in the same love, why then they have such strife against us? We see so many of their terroristic acts done against a Christian community, and there seems to be no retaliation on our part. Why can they not see and join with us rather than fight against us on this? What is the cause for the separation?
Mr. Brown, let me try to explain the point that I started with early on that led to this whole discussion. I truly firmly believe that despite the fact that the word God and Allah is used interchangeably but across the languages and across the translation, both gods are quite different. Muslims do not believe of the God of the Bible, although they believe the Bible was sent. They believe in the person who Jesus Christ was, but they do not believe of who God is and what God is that is in the Bible. The God or the Allah that is in the Quran is a completely different God. The only thing that is similar is really the name, and that's because of the language that translated it into. The official language that came, in the Quran that was written was in Arabic. And Arabic is the word Allah, again, in Arabic is the literal translation of God. And that is derived also from Yahweh or Jehovah in Hebrew. All those languages, the Semitic-based languages, they had a lot of overlap and interlinear relationship between them. Aside of that, from that similarities, there's really nothing in common between both of them. The anonymity, basically, that you spoke of about, they have this. I really don't have a straight answer. All what I can say is that I believe that us as Christians, we need to interject their life, the choices that they are trying to take in life before they reach that point. And the best way really to do it is to journey them, to walk with them as they take their journey in life. Yes, I'm sorry, Pastor.
I would think the big difference is they absolutely don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God.
Absolutely, they don't believe in the deity of personhood of Jesus Christ. That was going to be my point 2 and point 3. We'll be talking about more the deity and the triune God and the concept of Trinity in the Bible, and the Tawheed, which is the oneness of God in the Quran. But
But Muhammad was their prophet of their God.
yes.
They thought that someone obviously had connection with God, even if it's just the way anyone can learn from that, which doesn't make sense.
I am sorry, I don't think I understood your
I'm
question.
just confused because they say you can't really know God because it's infinite, but why do they follow Muhammad
Well, I think the answer to that, in a really simple form, is that Muhammad used. Muhammad did not state that he had an interaction with God. By the way, he mentioned that the angel Gabriel is the one the mediator between him and God, and he revealed the Quran for him. The following of Islam, they follow that path is because Muhammad's revelation of who God is was about his greatness and his honestly his powerfulness, and that alone made this huge gap and this huge divide between us and him. That's why for them they do not have that personal relationship with him. There is no way to establish that. It's beyond measure.
They believe that they serve and worship the God of Abraham.
Yes.
And that's where the two basically come together. But then where they take that is a different direction. They go differently than what the Bible teaches about him. And I think, isn't that basically because of Ishmael? The descendants of Ishmael, they kind of went one direction and Israel went the other.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's. I think the background for that, or the behind the scene for it, is that there are so many similarities between, especially the Torah or the Old Testament and the Quran. There we find the story of Abraham, the story of Moses, even Jonah. That's all mentioned in the Quran. Of course, those different variations is because that's what they are the descendants of Ishmael, and that's why that separation between Isaac and Ishmael. They do proclaim that both of us, as Christians and Muslims, we do worship the same God. We do worship God of Abraham, but the reality, of course, is quite different. Yeah.
I don't know, but I've been told that in the Quran, there is no word for love. Is that true?
Well, there is actually a word. That's one of the 99 names, again, of the God who is described in the Quran. And it's called Al-Wadud. And that's, but it's not the, and I'm trying to keep my answers as short and concise as possible. That's not the same agape love that we find in the New Testament, that sacrificial love that our Heavenly Father, our Jehovah God, bestowed upon us through the life of His Son, Jesus Christ. Al-Wadud, God's love in their vision, is the one that He is, if you obey my will and if you follow the commandments and what my prophet said, you will be granted access to paradise. It's completely two different interpretations, and it's a theology actually of love between both, the ones in the New Testament, the Bible, and the Quran. Does that make sense, Mr. Brown? We can talk more afterwards if you would like. No, there's none of that. That sacrificial love, the love that Jesus Christ showed us, no. What we talked about.
That'd be more of a lust rather than a love.
Pretty much.
So without that love, that might explain their hostility, because they have only, our human affection one for another, which they do not accept our worship of the same God that they worship. And so that brings on the war between the two. So that it's only through love that we can get along together.
Well, absolutely. There's a huge divide, again, as we said, between both. The concept, for example, the concept of forgiveness is non-existence in Islam. But it's one of the fruits that we have because of the agape love that God gave us in Christianity. Those are more points that we can expand and talk way more about. But in a nutshell, that's absolutely true. Jeremy, you got? I thought I saw your hand. I'm sorry.
The one Muslim that I talked to, he was explaining, he went through like some of the stories in the Bible, and it was like same stories, but totally different. Totally, it was almost like a perverted version of the different stories. But when he got to talking about good works, I said, well, how do you get saved? He said, well, you got to have more good works than bad works,
Right.
like you said.
Right.
But he said the way that they reckon them, just for example, would be like this: what he said, like a good work is worth like 10 points. An evil work is only worth like 1. So you can overcome one bad. It's so easy to have more good points on the scale than bad because the good far outweighs the bad, and that was the way he explained.
Well, I honestly don't know where did that come from. The first time I hear it, seriously. However, I know that in Islam there is way more denominations and sects and different interpretations even of the Quran and the tradition and the Hadith, way more than what we have in Christianity, by the way. And what I mean when I say Christianity, I put everyone under that umbrella, right? Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Coptics, even Jehovah's Witnesses. So in Islam, really, there is a lot of different sects. So it could be, type of different interpretation. But one thing I want to say for sure is that the common theology in Islam is that if you perform certain good works, those grant you direct access to paradise, no matter what you've done. What do they base their works on? Well, if it's all actually pretty much described in the Quran, there's a lot of it is direct variation or from the 10 Commandments, because again, the Quran really is based on is a book of law, honestly, and a book of tradition more than anything, and also it's a hugely book of contradictions, by the way. But that's a different subject. Please don't ask about that tonight. We'll stay here till 9 o'clock. No, I'm just. Those are, quantified in the Quran, the good works, and then what you think about it from a perspective of you have that, and then it's coupled with the Hadith, basically the tradition. That's the daily interactions that Muhammad had, because there is a lot of instructions and a lot of guidance happened. When the Quran was revealed to Muhammad, it was very vague and a lot of people were actually oblivious to it. So they had those tradition and the Hadith, and where people would come and sit with him and they would ask all these questions, and he would try to answer them by adding into it. Right.
You'll find the laws they should not do and the consequences if they do those laws, break those laws.
Right.
Now, do they have any books in the Quran to compare to Leviticus and Deuteronomy?
Yes, there are specific chapters that speak about certain actions, but not to the degree actually as the law was given to the Jews in the Old Testament. Not to that specific degree. But they do have specific designated chapters that speak about way more added law and works that need to be performed. And by the way, most of these references that I spoke about tonight, I have them. I have that list. So if anyone would like to do more research or reading, please, see me afterwards, and I can text it to you or email it to you or we can agree on a delivery method. Anybody have anything else? Or I'm sorry, Pastor, I noticed that time. I was going to get to point 2, but maybe next year if you allow me to. But I'm all done.